Hi, my name is Pete Hammond, and I am going to moderate tonight, and I hope you all enjoyed. This is an amazing movie, Killers of the Flower Moon. And man, we have such an impressive lineup here, so let me get to it right away. First up, he is the extraordinary production designer for the film, Jack Fisk. She is the Osage clothing consultant, Julie O'Keefe. She is the costume designer, Jacqueline West. And the indigenous casting director, Renee Haynes. And casting director, Ellen Lewis. And director of photography, Rodrigo Prieto. Oh, did I miss anyone? Oh yeah, okay. Writer, director, producer, Martin Scorsese.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Nice packed house here tonight at the Academy. Yeah, it's great. Great way to see this movie too. Congratulations. I know you've been working years on this, and it's gone through quite a journey to bring this to the screen, where it's finally opening in theaters. Yes, in theaters on Friday, which is important, I think.
This Friday.
This Friday. Okay. October 20th. Yeah, it's really happening.
I can't believe it.
All right, so just talk a little bit about your journey here in wanting to take on this project. Dare I say this is your first Western? Can I call it a Western?
Well, I've always been, as a kid with asthma and that sort of thing, in 1945, 46, my parents didn't allow me to play sports or run or do any of that, so they took me to the movies. And the sense of the outdoors I got was always through the American Western. And I fell in love with the genre over the years. And I always felt, and I always say this, that I think the American Western of that time ended with The Wild Bunch by Sam Peckinpah.
Right, yeah.
And so then it became something else, revisionism and that sort of, and all that stuff is good, it's okay, but it had its time and place, and there were some, I don't want to get into the history of that, because that's also, it turns out, almost 60 years ago too, 50, 60 years, and I can't believe it. Anyway, so for me, I've always been interested, they always said, Marty, you got to do a Western and do a Western. I said, well, what can I bring to it? What can I bring to it? And ultimately, when I was presented with this book and Eric Roth's first draft script, I found that I became fascinated by the sense of, the way the book is constructed and is beautifully done. The subtitle is the birth of the FBI. So at that time it's called the Bureau of Investigation. So in a way, it's all these guys, Tom White and these guys, coming in from the outside into a place where they're going to figure out who did it. And I always say, when I was reading it, I realized it's not a matter of who did it, it's who didn't do it.
Yeah.
They all did it. Maybe we all did it. You know what I'm saying? So are we part of this? Are we part of even enjoying the beautiful Westerns that were made, I think, and understanding that as our history, so to speak? Are we, in a sense, is this the time for us to really think about what constitutes the ideal of America? The ideal of a society where everyone is equal and has the pursuit of happiness. And so that, and the sense that I felt that ultimately, from telling the story from the point of view of the Bureau investigation coming in and dealing with these people, and Leo DiCaprio playing Tom White, who's played beautifully in the film ultimately by Jesse Plemons, was that these were things that I've seen before. That doesn't mean they're bad. You know, it isn't what you do, it's how you do it. And so I don't know if I couldn't help having the image in my mind of Henry Fonda and my darling Clementine when he's sitting on the porch and he has his foot up on the post, or the best, I say, of Clint Eastwood and that sort of thing. And I didn't know what to do in terms of how to make Tom White any different. And we were working on this for quite a while, Eric Roth and myself. There was I had to do The Irishman during that period. And then afterwards, we got hit with the pandemic. And so there was a lot of time to work and think about the script. What ultimately happened, too, before the pandemic, is that I went to Oklahoma a few times, Ellen Lewis, all of us with us. And I met with Chief Standing Bear and his wife, Julie, and Addie Roanhorse and Chad Renfro. And in that meeting in Pawhuska, I was very concerned because the only other experience I had with indigenous people was in 1974 on Pine Ridge Reservation in Dakota, and I wasn't prepared for it. I had thought that the West, I was 31 or whatever. I only made Mean Streets. I was still making Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. And I thought everything was settled. I didn't understand what a reservation was. So I was thrown into something that was quite traumatic. And it took me, I was fascinated by what had happened. And what I mean is I was traumatized by what I experienced there for many different reasons. And then some years later, I met a man named Storm who was very interesting and had a conversation with him. He was a poet and was doing Raging Bull, and it was very enlightening. And I've always been then fascinated, or not fascinated, but wanting to know more of how I could not know and then be so shocked, you see. And ultimately, as we were developing the story, we worked to make it as possibly strong as possible. But what I mean is that, go back to we were there in Oklahoma, and after meeting Chief Standing Bear, another visit to Oklahoma, we had a very big dinner given to us by the people at Grey Horse. And a number of them got up, and don't forget, you see a lot of the people in the film, you see them in front of the camera and behind the camera, they're descendants of the people in the movie. So you have a Burkhardt right next to a Roanhorse, and they're all working together. And I didn't quite get that until I got there, and I began to realize that, what was really going on. And at the second meeting, at that giant, there was about 300 people at that dinner, people got up and spoke about their families and ancestors, more than ancestors, grandparents, uncles who had been killed, grandmothers, mothers, etc. And a woman named Margie Burkhardt got up, and she was, I think, the granddaughter, I'm not quite sure, of Ernest, I think. And she got up and said they were all concerned about the kind of film I make, which is at times pretty visceral, or there's a lot of I'm dealing with the underworld, criminals, violence, etc. But then they had seen what she did, and a number of others saw silence. And she said, I see what you're seeing here. And she started to extend trust. See, and in that talk that she gave, she said, remember one thing, that it isn't as simple as bad guys and good guys, and the people are victims and they can't do anything about it. So they were all friends. This was a community. And there's another guy told me, a lawyer actually there, said, you got to understand, Bill Hale and Henry Roan were best friends. And I said to myself, whoa, that's the story. That's the story. And then she said, you got to really understand that it wasn't as simple as the villain and victim. Molly and Ernest were in love. Wow, that's it. And as we started to work on the script, we tried to put that in, mixed with all the other Bureau investigation stuff, and we kept getting distracted by it, and finally, distracted by the policier, I should say, aspects of it. And finally, Leo looked at me, it was right before COVID hit, and he came to my house and he said, I gotta tell you, where's the heart of this film? I said, the heart's Molly and Ernest. He said, well, what if I play Ernest? I said, okay, we'll just take the script, rip it inside out. I said, well, what was interesting, he said, rather than we're out there in the outside, we're on the ground floor. We're literally in the middle of the battle. And I would say, like a soldier, you only know what's going on, but they tell me from like a foot in front of you, a foot to the right, foot to the left. You don't see anything else. You don't know who's winning, who's losing. But you're on the ground, and you're on the ground running with them. And before you know it, you're giving in. Ernest is giving in. How complicit really is he? Very, ultimately. But did he really want to? Is he a coward? No, he's weak. He's weak, and yet she loves him. And then at some point during COVID, we were still trying to write it, but it was being done with Zoom and that sort of thing. At one point, he said, "Well, these guys are pretending to be this way and that way. Everybody knows that they just wanted money. So why don't we have her say it?" I said, "Yeah." So she says, Coyote wants money. And he goes, "Yeah, I love money. Admit it." So then the charm, so we get rid of this business of what's the motivation. They love each other. She knows what the problems are with him. He's kind of a wild guy. She kind of has a wild side to her also, and she loves him. His sisters tell her, be careful. But he says he doesn't want the money that way. He doesn't, it's how they fall into this tragedy. All of them, slowly but surely, they all fall into this. And that's when I thought we could really do something. But at that point, COVID had hit, and we had to keep working the script. And ultimately, when Ellen found Lily Gladstone, things started to really come together, because she really is the beating heart of the picture.
Talk about that, Ellen, because that's an extraordinary piece of casting. The indigenous actors, all of that aspect. When I saw this picture, actually, in your office, I saw it in your screening room, and then went to Cannes and wrote a review. And in my review, I called this movie a game changer, because I haven't seen one quite this authentic. There have been some that are, but not on this level, really.
Right. Well, we knew, every movie that I've done with Marty over these many years, I think we've tried to be authentic as possible and telling all of those stories. But obviously this was a very serious story we were going to be telling, and I had worked with Renee Haynes on Godless, a limited series for Netflix, and I knew that she was an expert in Indigenous casting, so I contacted Renee right away. She had read the book, and we knew that everyone who was written as Indigenous would absolutely be played as Indigenous. It's just how we work. We were given fantastic early material that were home movies of the Osage, and obviously David Grand's book has many photographs. We had photographs of so many people, and so we immediately knew the task at hand. And then we headed to Oklahoma in November 2019. And
it was really important to us to capture the beauty and the majesty of the Osage people. And so we first did a session in Pawhuska, the heart of the Osage Nation, and then Tulsa and Oklahoma City, just for Indigenous individuals who were interested in participating in what we were doing. And we had over 2,500 people come through our line. And many of those people who came through our line are part of that Indigenous cast in named roles. And we couldn't be more proud of the Osage Nation for really showing up and really delivering.
Yeah. And what do they think when they see this film now? I mean, when the Indigenous community, and they see this on the screen in this way. Hollywood wasn't always known for that. I remember Anthony Quinn in many movies and Flap and things like that, and all of these, Rock Hudson even, you know.
Rock Hudson, Jeff Chandler, and all of them, yes. But the thing is, you have to remember that there was a brief period post-war during the noir period, which I would to remind everybody that when I was a kid, when I went to see movies, it wasn't noir, there were the movies. Glenn Ford's really mad they killed his wife and he's out to get everybody in the big heat. I don't know, you know, that's life up there. And Naked City, that was it, I lived it, I was there. So, you know, at the same time the Westerns were there, and there was a brief period, the man to really stand out there is Delmer Daves. And, yeah, I mean, Broken Arrow and Last Wagon and Drumbeat, he was trying. Of course, all the key native characters are played by, you know, by white actors. But Broken Arrow was an enlightening film. It showed ritual. It showed the character of Jimmy Stewart as a person who respected them. I believe, I remember. Also, we had the Anthony Mann's Devil's Doorway. You had, which is a noir western. In a way, very strange, but very tough. But you had Robert Taylor playing a native. It's a bit of a stretch. I mean, I like Robert Taylor, but you know. Anyway, you had Robert Aldrich's film with Burt Lancaster playing Apache, which is a really interesting film, which taught a lot of people. Park Chan-wook was a film he saw on television in South Korea all the time, and it showed that. Well, basically a non-white person in a colonized area could still rebel. And I didn't think of it that way. You know, and I say, oh, so Park Chan-wook, Apache, Robert Aldrich, incredible. Anyway, it really brilliant how it all pulled together. I said, yeah. But again, it was Lancaster playing the part. So, but there were attempts to try to show the more, and not romanticize like Ramona or some of the films made in the late 20s or late teens where they try to romanticize it. The good thing about the films made, I think, in the teens was that you really had Native Americans playing them. They're playing themselves. It was wild. I mean, some of that still exists, thankfully. You know,
it's really interesting. I could go on about Delmer Daves forever because he's really an interesting director.
He really is. Yeah.
That I think is very underrated, actually.
I agree.
With all of his. Rodrigo Prieto, I told you out there, you're shooting every movie this year. This is amazing. Barbie, you know, everything else. Unbelievable. Talk about your collaboration with Mr. Scorsese right here and how you developed the color palette, which is fantastic in this movie, and how you approached shooting this on the Great Prairie out there, too.
It was really a process. I mean, every movie is like that, but this one especially. I think just as the script kept evolving and the approach to it kept shifting and changing, the same with experimentation with what we were going to do visually, and we played around with many ideas and settled on what you see. But even before that, we explored. Okay, so this is in this story we're representing. This story, and we're showing it in this film, but we're also showing how it's been represented in other ways, and with the newsreel, as you see in the film, and obviously the radio show at the ending. So how are we representing it? We thought of still photography as an approach, and tested even pinhole photography, and how to achieve that in cinematography, which was interesting. Infrared. We even Marty said, why don't we do 3D? You know, I remember that. We even explored, to feel the size of the landscape, right? So we thought of 100 things, and tint and tone, so many things. And so, yes, so a lot of thoughts and a lot of, throwing tests onto the screen and seeing what would stick. So we settled with what you see, which is basically separating the images that have to do with only the Osage, which we photographed everything on motion picture negative, but those scenes we wanted to keep the natural color and really represent the connection with nature, with the sun and the sky, the earth, and so that was an important visual aspect. But then we wanted to represent the sons and daughters of the European settlers, let's say, the original immigrants to America, with photography as well. And so we emulated autochrome, which is a technique to create color that was pioneered by the Lumiere brothers, transparencies actually. So we emulated that color for the story of, Ernest and Hale and their families, in contrast with the natural color of the Osage, of the scenes of the Osage. That was a main aspect of the first part of the movie. But then Marty said, so then how do we evolve this? We need to, how do we evolve the drama visually? And so at a certain point, we switched the look for everybody now, not the Osage versus, the white people. And everybody is now in a really deep, traumatic experience after, in the case of these characters, explosion that happens, in Molly's sister's house. And from then on, we shifted everything to ENR, which is a process of printing film that was pioneered by Vittorio Storaro and Technicolor in Rome. I think the first movie he used it for was Reds. And this is a technique for printing that desaturates color but adds contrast. So it becomes harsher. And also the lighting becomes harder and harsher. And the characters, it feels more uncomfortable. And so that's what we evolved. And then towards the end, the epilogue, let's call it that way, the radio show, we used, it's called LUT, it's a lookup table that emulated 3-strip Technicolor. And I was terrified of this, this was an idea we talked about, but if there's, yes, the red curtain and all that, and if there's anybody in this world that understands 3-strip Technicolor sitting right next to me. So now, Rodrigo, create a lookup table that looks like 3-strip Technicolor, right? So we worked hard at it at Company 3 with Yvonne Lucas. So anyway, that was the final part of the color for the movie.
Amazing. And he did his extended Hitchcock in that scene too. Very nice.
See that color.
Just pops up. I go, wow. Okay. Why did you decide to do that, by the way? I'm just curious.
Ultimately, that sequence was shot after the initial shooting period. And it was shot in New York because, radio shows were done at Rockefeller Center, in reality. And I had the idea because the part of the promotion for what became really the FBI in the 1930s were radio shows. And some of those radio shows exist on paper. And as I said earlier, I said, ours is bad, but this is much worse. Well, terrible. Anyway, but people will listen to it, oh, there's the story of the Osage murders, and that's the end of that, and we got the bad guys, they were all in jail, and that's the end. And that was it. Remember, the FBI did this, and it's brought to you by Lucky Strike. So, really, basically, all of this suffering, all of this torture, all of this love and hate and pain, and all of this comes to a radio show that at the end says, enjoy some Lucky Strikes, and remember the FBI brought this to you. And we buy it. The mass audience buys it. So now, I'm looking at this, I'm saying, well, this is an entertainment. I'm trying to make entertainment with some sense of a story or elements in it that could resonate with an audience, not necessarily just something which is entertainment, which is very good, in many cases beautifully made, but it's like popcorn, you can eat it and throw it away. This, I sort of wanted to make it have some resonance. And I said, so in effect, not only I feel we're doing the same, and we're also part of this history. We are the descendants of these people who came here, from Europe, and so in most cases, and so in a way, the stories about complicity and maybe ultimately I'm the only one who could try to do, and I quite honestly, one of the few places in New York that had a stage like that was my old high school, Cardinal Hayes High School. And so we shot it there, which had its own resonance. I felt that the obit was too important I didn't know how to direct somebody else by that point to say those words. And so I took a chance and did it myself, thinking that if it couldn't work, I would get another actor and shoot the next day with someone else. But ultimately, my wife was there, two of my daughters, my granddaughter, the other people. And as I did take after take, I realized the weight of it hit me. And that's what you see. And I just said, okay, let it go. Because people felt it that day. We were there and they said, the actors did, and we're all saying, hey, that was interesting because we were having all this crazy stuff with, not crazy stuff, but the radio show, how to do the gunshots, opening jail doors and that sort of thing.
Jack White.
And Jack White doing the, Jack White doing the thing like, Osage, don't like it, saying the words of the guy with the tom-tom. And then this guy comes out and says, and I remember going to her grave, Molly's grave, I saw it, and you see the whole family lined up. And that's what hit me. Wow. And while I was saying those words over and over again, and finally it just sunk in. So I left it.
It works. I could not believe until I read this incredible New York Times profile that just came out on Jack Fisk, sitting there at the end, this legendary production designer and artist and everything you want to call him. You have got to read this profile of him. It is absolutely fascinating, but I could not believe you'd never worked with him before, and you were going to work with someone else on this movie initially, I think. And how did this collaboration come about? How did the idea to bring in Jack Fisk for the first time with Martin Scorsese?
Well, I'm just, I've been a great admirer all the way back to Terry Malick's early films with him, and then Paul Thomas Anderson, and it just made sense. I said, "It's the guy who knows this," and so let's try, let's see. Originally, in fact, a lot of the people we started with originally, I changed the crew after spending a little time at the Osage. I said, I don't know if I have the people with me that are attuned to this in the right way. And then I changed it, and then COVID hit. But that made me rethink everything. It was a big change for me, the picture. And I'm an urban person, as most people, I know, may be surprising to you, but I don't want to shock you. But and so when we got to those prairies, I'm looking out, and whoa, wild horses was like idyllic. It was like the Elysian Fields, And I said, dude, he knows it. So I remember asking Paul Thomas Anderson. He said, sure, call him up, see what the story is. I don't know if I called you. Somebody called you, right?
The producer called me.
Okay, a producer called me. Okay.
And we had a Zoom call.
Okay, that's what it was. And he seemed amenable to it.
It's really, Jack, it really is amazing the process that you go through, the amount of research, just on all these different sets and things, finding the house that Molly lived in, which nobody could find. Can you talk about this, your approach? It's really a detective story in and of itself. People think production designer, what do? They build sets, they design this. It's so much more.
Well, my lucky day was when I got a call to talk with Marty, and he told me that he wanted to make a Western, but he also wanted to tell the true story of the Osage. And to begin to design the sets, you have to know the people that live in them. And I started trying to find out about Molly, her family, and how they were living at the time. And I got great help from the people in the Osage, and I went to Marianne Bowers, Marty's archivist and a producer on the film, had tons of research. And I found in the probate for Molly's mother, will, where Molly stated that she didn't own her own house, she lived in a house with her mother, and she'd lived there her whole life. And I'd read in David Grand's excellent book about Maggie Burkhart saying, you want to see the house that I grew up in? Well, she took him to this little shack, kind of, in Grey Horse. And David Grand made a comment, he said, it's more like a cabin than a house. And I started thinking that Maggie Burkhart is the great-granddaughter of Lizzie Q, and Lizzie left the house to Cowboy and Elizabeth, and she was Cowboy's daughter, and so that must be the house. There weren't that many houses in Grey Horse, and I talked to some neighbors around that house, and they remembered Maggie Burkhart going to school with them when they were young. And I sent Marty a note and a picture of the house, and I said, I don't think they lived in a mansion. And Marty said to me, I'll never forget, he said two things. He said, you mean I'll never get to see her come down the staircase? And I think he was referring to Gone with the Wind. So he gave up that.
Those are always great scenes.
Yeah. And his other comment, which haunted me for a few days, was, how will we know they're rich?
Yeah.
And the fact is that in a family of six, their father had died in 1913, I believe. So you had the mother, Lizzie Q, the father, Jimmy, you had the four sisters. Between them, they each got a headright because they were born and on the record books before 1907. And at that year, 1920, a headright was worth about $59,000, I think. Sort of the, and in today's equivalency of six people getting that money, it turned out to be like $918,000 for that family, where the national average for people working family was $3,300 in the United States in 1920. So they were rich, but the Osage didn't flaunt it. I mean, they couldn't get a hold of a lot of it because of guardians and the United States government keeping stuff back for the future. But they have a history in the arts. There's a beautiful book on Osage art, and they're so sophisticated in their tastes. And they used this money to get things that they loved. And it was ribbons they would get sometimes from Europe. It was cars. They love cars. Henry Ford was painting them all black, but they liked color. So in Fairfax, there was a car painter. There was a business, and they would paint the cars whatever color they wanted. And it grew that they used that money to buy fine things that they enjoyed, and they shared a lot. I read a journal by Maud Cox, who grew up in Grey Horse. She was a white girl, and she said when she moved there, the Osage kids brought over a pony so she could ride to school. They gave her a pony, and I knew how generous they were. And I'd also heard that before allotment, the Osage didn't have a word for mine. It was a communal society, and they shared things. And and even today, when you go to any kind of ritual or festival, they're giving each other blankets and gifts. It's just I wish that the nation had been able to grow undisturbed and to see what it had grown into. But we're telling the story of why it didn't.
Again, it's what we can learn from other cultures and other people, and not how we can take advantage of them. That's the idea. I'm kind of like a saint or anything. I'm just saying this is what the reality should be in life. And to know when he says, we talk the grandfather is the son, and the moon is the mother, and that sort of thing. There's a respect for the earth and there's stuff like that, which for me was extremely foreign because, as I say, I grew up in tenements. But on the other hand, I did have a fascination with what the earth could be, and the beauty of it.
Okay, now Jacqueline and Julie, tell us about the clothes. Take it away, because it's amazing what you've done here in recreating and finding these, again, I'm going to use the words authentic. So Jacqueline, talk about your approach here.
Well,
after working on movies like Dune.
but also The Revenant and The New World.
Wildly different.
I've had the great joy of doing 9 movies with Jack Fisk. So I have to, there's a bar there that I have to reach. And I knew that working with Marty, it had to all be very authentic. And also I learned both on the New World and the Revenant that the most important thing is representing the people correctly. If you're going to tell their story, tell it with, you know, a certain degree of respect and authenticity. And this is such a seminal story for the Osage. I knew how important it was for us to get it right. And fortunately, Chief Standing Bear sent Julie to me, who was just, that was a real treasure for me, because I came to Oklahoma with maybe 2,000 pictures. I'm obsessed by research because my background is art history, and that's all about the detail, right? You look at brush strokes, but you see, you can get the detail down perfectly, but the nuance of how something is worn is so, so important. How the blanket's worn. When you wear a blanket at a certain, you wear it a certain way for a certain circumstance. And for that, I really needed Julie. And she also brought the beauty that we made this movie there was that we had all the craftspeople who really knew. There's something I've portrayed in movies, other plains, nations, but the Osage are unique in their clothing, their craftsmanship. The ribbon work is unique to the Osage. The finger weaving, the wabankas, the wedding coats. Could talk for an hour about the wedding coats and their history. But Julie could bring to my department craftspeople who were Osage. She calls them kitchen artists, and make these reproduce in their own homes the beautiful ribbon work blankets and the finger weaving that their ancestors wore. She even arranged, we did a drive-through in the parking lot because it was the pandemic, and they brought all the things from their family trunks, from their families who were actually part of this, of the Reign of Terror. So we had real items that we could copy, and that was so important. It made the community part of telling this story.
Yeah, Julie, can you elaborate on that?
So part of what you saw tonight within the movie is a history within the clothing, and you see that within the materials. You see this beautiful ribbon, and you see this broadcloth that was actually military cloth. And a lot of these pieces were basically traded to go across our lands way before we ever came to Oklahoma, way before 1860. It was happening within the 1700s. And so what you see is a history of different countries coming in and how we incorporated those materials into what we wear to this day. And so when Jack was talking about wealth earlier and what he saw, what you actually see even within our culture is it's about how much that we can give, because in these times when these materials were coming in, until the point that we had all of this wealth, our value system was never on money. And you see that represented in each one of these characters in this family. So you see Lizzie Q, and she is basically dressed in traditional clothing. She is someone who has been living on the plains in her childhood. She and her husband marry. They have these children. And then the government comes in, and there's a life that's being forced on us. And we're trying to find our place in this world that is coming to us that we have no control. So you see the daughters, the government mandates that these children go to missionary schools. If you're a boy, you'd be going to a military school. And it would be far away from your family because it was about assimilation. So then you take a look at how each one of these characters, when they come back, are representing themselves. And they're taught English language because we weren't allowed to speak our own language. And you see a lot of our language in this, which I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of all the speakers and the consultants that helped with that, because we almost lost that. And so you're bringing this in, and you have first speakers of language, of an English language, similar to immigrants that you see today that come in. But we're in our own lands, speaking really a foreign language to us that we have to use. So then you see each one of these daughters and how they represent themselves in this world. And so you see Molly, or you see Anna first, because she's the oldest, and she has decided to move into a more modern, this is how she's going to be accepted. This is what she's going to do. Then you sit down and you see Molly, and Molly comes in and she wants to be traditional. She is close to her ties, and the thing I love is Jacqueline had all these research photos that basically were showing, you know, Parisian shoes or handbags. And so there's small details to Molly that you see in the movie, but she's really presenting herself as traditional. Then you see the other two women, and it's Minnie and it's Rita. And so they're using a modern clothing, but they're bringing in blankets, and all of those are within trade. And all of that tells the history of treaties that were coming into us, treaties that were broken, how we dealt with people that were coming into our lands. A lot of times you'll hear in school, you know, well, there was a peace pipe. It wasn't a peace pipe. It was a commitment. You were coming to our lands. We were committing to you to sit down and find out, why are you here? What do you want with us? And then once you told us and we came to this agreement, these items came through. And so that's how we incorporated it into, and we gave you safe passage there. So that's really kind of within the story is another story, and it's within our clothing and the history. And I do have to say that I didn't come on until later into the film. It was in I think, March. And I walked into Jacqueline's studio because in the movie world, when I was growing up, I mean, it was Gunsmoke. And so, you know, you have everybody looking like Apaches. And so you sit down and it's like, we don't wear any of that on our head. We have beautiful porcupine quill roaches that the men are wearing, or turbans or finger weaving, or things that are, you know, being told in this clothing that really had never been told before. And when I saw her storyboards, and I could see that not only was it coming down from the top from Marty, that this was going to be a bar set very high for how we were going to be represented as our people, but that Jacqueline really understood every single struggle that all of us were going through to acclimate to this world. And she had it set up in this beautiful way that was floor to ceiling with thousands of photos. But I really understood then that we were really going to understand each other. And that really is the gift for my people about how this story is being told. And the dedication to everybody sitting on the stage, they had the same level of dedication. And for Native people, there is no one else that will tell the story this way. And I'm really praying in the future that a lot of Native stories have the same opportunity, and the directors in the Hollywood really understands that this is how it should be told.
Wow. Pretty amazing. You can tell by talking to each one of you that, you know, you just invest so much. You put together an amazing group of people to tell this story, and we didn't even get to talk about De Niro and DiCaprio
And Lily,
and Lily and
the heart of the movie, yeah.
amazing actors who can't come out and promote it right now, which is a shame. But this is your 11th picture with De Niro or
My
something?
10th film with
10?
Bob, and 6 with Leo. 6.
6, but you've never all worked
No.
together.
But they, you know, Bob introduced me to him back when he did this Boy's Life.
Yeah.
And you know, somehow there was that connection, and they hadn't worked together in the same film. Interestingly enough, I think there's similar roles in a way, the father and the son, the uncle and the nephew, in a way. And also, you can call me King, Well, it's Bob.
Yeah.
You know, so Leo call him King.
De Niro, by the way, is just deliciously evil in this. Unbelievable. He just sucks you in with his like charm, and then really is unspeakably
Well, he
evil.
believes that they're his friends. You know, that letter that Larry Fessenden reads in the radio show is a real letter from Bill Hale to the people in Osage. Says, well, how are my friends doing? I mean, you know, this is the story. This is really the story.
It's so good to have it unfolded and let us see it now, because I certainly never knew this, and it's shocking. It's a horror movie in some ways. It really is, and amazing achievement. I know it's late, so I'm not going to keep you guys any longer, but we'll see you down the trail, and tell everybody to go see this film. It opens on Friday.
Thank you so much.